Donald Trump now loves Ukraine and hates Vladimir Putin. What caused him to change his mind, and will this position stick?
We're going to be speaking to his former economic advisor and friend, Carla Sands, to work out what's going on in the US president's head.
I wish that the UK leaders and our European friends and allies, especially in Nato, would get their heads around the fact that this war is not winnable for Ukraine. It's not winnable. Ukraine cannot win. They're not part of NATO. And frankly, you'll hear this in the United States, this isn't our war. This is Europe's war. What was it caused by? Weak and flabby militaries throughout Europe.
Overnight, Trump seems to have radically changed his mind on Ukraine. He was elected in 2024, promising to end the war.
That deal would be easy. A lot of it has to do with the money. A lot of it has to do with the military, we're giving. But I would get that deal done within 24 hours. That war has to be stopped. That war is a disaster.
But it appears he has now had it up to here with Vladimir Putin and has told this to the BBC.
You've said you were 4 times close to a deal with Putin.
Yeah, I thought I had a deal 4 times.
Are you done with him? I mean, I know that sounds a simplistic thing.
But I'm disappointed in him. But I'm not done with him. But I'm disappointed in him. So we had a deal done 4 times, and then you go home and you see he just attacked a nursing home or something in Kyiv. I said, what the hell was that all about?
Speaking in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte, who is the head of NATO, he offered 2 new policies. One, America is going to sell weapons to Europe, who will then pass them on to Ukraine. These are short-range missiles, howitzer rounds, and medium-range air-to-air missiles. And the second policy is he is threatening to hit Russia's trading partners with severe 100% tariffs on imports to America if a peace deal with Russia hasn't been reached within 50 days.
Which is interesting because we've switched from sanctions now to tariffs.
Yes.
Why use sanctions if tariffs will do? And then in turn, could there be threats made to Russia's partner in crime, China, on the same level?
Yeah.
Just screw both economies.
And of course, tariffs are also just his favourite weapon. It's his favourite
Indeed.
thing to do is to hit something with a tariff. Establishment Republicans who have long supported Ukraine will absolutely love this, people like Senator Lindsey Graham. Most voters in America, when they're polled, dislike Russia and support Ukraine. But of course, part of the MAGA base is, dare I say, isolationist or anti-war, and they will be really browned off about this because they feel they voted for Trump to end the war. So, how did we get to this place?
Carla Sands, former economic advisor to Donald Trump, a businesswoman and a former United States ambassador to Denmark, joins us now. Lovely to see you this morning, Carla. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're a little confused. We are a little bit confused here because Trump seemingly was in support of Putin to an extent against Ukraine. We had that unedifying scene in the Oval Office with President Zelensky. And now he seems to have completely changed his mind on Russia and is sounding extremely hawkish. What's happened? What's changed?
Well, I think the problem is that the UK folks are listening to the left-wing American media. President Trump is a deal maker. President Trump wants the United States to be secure. President Trump is the peace president. Zelensky was out of line in the Oval Office. President Trump just looks at the world as it is, not as he wishes it could be. And so he's saying, I want to get a deal done here. I don't have an honest broker on one side. I've got a kind of squishy guy on the other side that benefits from the continuation of the bloodshed. So, I think he's going to get a deal done. It's just going to be a lot harder than it had to be. His goal is to stop the killing and to make peace. So let's see. I think that he'll get it done. But now we see the threat of sanctions, more arms. It's getting uglier and more complicated.
I take your point, Carla, about he wants a deal, but I suppose the view of many in the West is by saying you want to have a deal, you already hand a win to Putin. Because up until Joe Biden lost and Donald Trump took over, the general strategy was just keep fighting until Russia is ground down and then it comes to the negotiating table because it's forced to, whereas Donald Trump was happier instead to invite it to the negotiating table when it was in a slightly stronger position. So how does one explain why he has that attitude towards Russia, which is so very different to much of the West?
Yeah, if I may, there were two premises you stated that were incorrect. It's not Russia that gets ground down. Russia's method of war is they ground down their opponents.
Right.
So you've got the grinding down on the wrong side. That's Russia's method. And number two, President Trump understands this war has to have an end game. When you talk about just supplying weapons with no plan for winning, well, that's a losing strategy that just drains the treasury of the United States and of European capitals, and it impoverishes our people with no benefit. So President Trump is looking at this and saying, how do I end this? There has to be an end game. President Biden never even spoke to Vladimir Putin. He never even attempted to end the war. He simply fed the war machine and the killing. That has to stop. President Trump's goals are correct. I wish that the UK leaders and our European friends and allies, especially in NATO, would get their heads around the fact that this war is not winnable for Ukraine. It's not winnable. Ukraine cannot win. They're not part of NATO. And frankly, you'll hear this in the United States, this isn't our war. This is Europe's war. What was it caused by? Weak and flabby militaries throughout Europe, right? With very little capabilities, candidly, at that time when they were invaded in 2022, but also a feckless American president. So we now have a strong president in the White House. I wish that our UK and European friends and allies would acknowledge it and work with President Trump to bring this conflict to an end, to help our societies grow. The UK just had a retraction, like lost ground for all of the people of Great Britain. And also, your energy is very expensive and it's causing deindustrialization with the wild net zero agenda, which is anti-human. So if we can get our energy in a good place with our allies and partners, we need strong partners that are prosperous and that can have credible defenses, but also strong growing economies. This is important. We can't be a growing island alone and be strong as a nation. We need great partners.
Okay, Carla, if I may, even if perhaps Donald Trump's position hasn't changed, as you suggest, he was always all along looking for a deal to be struck, it is a change in the position of the Republican Party historically. First presidential campaign I covered was 2012, when Mitt Romney in a debate talked about Russia being the most important strategic opponent of the United States. Barack Obama slapped him down and said, I can see Ronald Reagan behind you on the bookshelf. He said the 80s called they want the foreign policy back. Republicans were incensed. And then when Russia attacked Ukraine, Republicans said, look, we were proven correct. So the traditional Republican position up to Donald Trump was take a strong stand on Russia on the basis that, okay, it's a European war, but ultimately, if America is to be the preeminent power in the globe, it cannot allow countries like Russia or China to bully their neighbors and, by implication, undermine or threaten American strategic superiority.
Well, so I hear what you're saying. And it wasn't just Barack Obama that came with a snarky response to Mitt Romney. It was also the moderator, Candy Crawley, who actually said incorrect facts and tried to cover for Barack Obama in that debacle of a debate.
I remember it well.
Which I think Mitt Romney lost his run for the president during that debate. Unfortunately, he had the receipts. He should have pressed forward, and he whiffed it.
But you take my point that the party's position on this has switched since Donald Trump became the party's leader.
I disagree with you. So I've been watching China over the past 30 years. We had bad trade deals with China. We had bad trade deals with other allies, for instance, Canada and Mexico, since the 90s. The hollowing out of the United States, of our towns across the nation, the deindustrialization happened over the decades because governments on both sides of the aisle in the US incentivized companies to move their production offshore to Asia and then ultimately to China. And that has been what has caused the deindustrialization of the United States, where everybody said, oh, now we're a service economy. We don't have to make things. But no, it's not true. You have to make things to be a great power. You have to make steel and aluminum. You have to make things that if you will need in a conflict. You have to make rare earths, and you have to process them on your own land. You have to be able to have pharmaceutical precursors and make your own pharmaceuticals. China has threatened us on all those things. China is the great, I would say the greatest danger for UK, EU, US, for global sovereignty, for the freedoms that we in the West enjoy. And unfortunately, their kind of socialism is being imposed largely across the EU. When you see what EU leadership is doing to take away freedom of speech, to try to do central planning, and to basically take over the sovereignty of individual nations. We need strong sovereign countries. Nobody goes and fights and dies for the world. They fight for their country, for their culture, for their family, and for the flag, if you will.
But Carla,
and so, yeah.
On that point, the sovereignty of Ukraine is important, isn't it? I mean, you can be on the right. I get the criticism that the left have made of Donald Trump's foreign policy. That's fine. You can be on the right and say to yourself, I want defence spending to increase across all NATO countries, including the UK. I sympathise with the US president when he says that the Americans are footing too much of the bill, but also believe in Ukraine's right to not be invaded by a foreign enemy. And you say they can't win this war. If that's the case, why is Donald Trump asking Zelensky, a man who you earlier referred to, I think, as a squishy guy, why is he asking him on July the 4th of all days whether they can target Moscow themselves if they're given the right weapons? Why is Trump now saying that to Zelensky? Why is he asking questions about their capabilities of striking Russia if you think that the war can't be won at all?
Well, but President Trump has just said he wants a peace deal within 50 days or Russia will have 100% tariffs on their energy. And the US Senate is threatening 500% tariffs on anyone who does business with Russia. He's just trying to jam a deal. And the fact is, he's going to get a deal. And Vladimir Putin should do a good deal, a better deal than he's going to get if it's an ugly deal. This war is going to end. President Trump's not going to let it drag out for years. I don't believe it. And Putin and his leadership team is going to have to come up with the best win that they can get and keep their dignity, but get out.
But don't you agree that Trump asking Zelensky whether that Kyiv could drop bombs on Moscow is indicative of him perhaps leaning into the idea that Ukraine could win this with America's help?
I can't speak to what President Trump thinks he's going to do. I believe that this is a negotiation and that it's going to come to an end. We saw what President Trump did in Iran. He speaks kind of softly and carries a very big stick, if you will, to use an old analogy. So I think we can anticipate surprises. He may keep the leadership in Moscow off balance as this moves forward. Remember that surprise is really good in negotiations. That your opponent doesn't know everything you're going to do is helpful. In fact, it's the only way that we'll defeat the Chinese Communist Party in their goal to be the global hegemon.
Can you comment on what some of the MAGA base think about this policy shift? I know you don't think it's a shift, but just accepting that premise that there's been a slight change in tone. Some of the MAGA base are not very happy with Donald Trump's foreign policy, be it on Iran. They were against intervention in Iran. Be it this, they just want the war to end and they don't understand why America's continued to be involved. Tucker Carlson, the media giant, has become particularly critical of the president. Is there any sign of a slight split in the MAGA camp on this stuff?
Well, I think that people are people and they have their own opinions. There was a mixed, opinion about bombing the nuclear capabilities in Iran. But as a matter of fact, President Trump took a really bold move and did it. And the outcome is excellent, right? Between Israel and the US, Iran, the global state sponsor, the greatest state sponsor of terror around the world, is on their back foot. And that is a good thing. The people of Iran deserve to have opportunity like the people of UK do. They don't want to be ruled by these mullahs who are, they're opposed to everything that we all love and share. The people of Iran deserve better. But President Trump, you have to think about how he's able to pivot and be nimble in order to get a good outcome. I think that in Europe and the UK, process is very important, and kind of, signaling what's coming and being very gentle about how you go about diplomacy. But President Trump looks at it and says, what's the outcome I need? How do I get there? And he's outcome focused, more than process focused. And I appreciate that. I agree with you. There is some mixed opinion among the base or Republicans about whether we should even send anything to Ukraine. I would say probably half of his supporters don't want to think going to Ukraine. And then about another half, or maybe a third, would like to continue to send arms, but they're not thinking strategically, like, what is the outcome? If you just continue to deplete your treasury and your arms when you have larger conflicts that you need to focus on, greater threats you need to focus on, then it becomes a sort of a no-brainer. But let's not forget that the war would end today if China stopped funding and assisting Russia in this war.
Final question, Carla. Is it not the case that he's had to pivot because he's been played by Putin? I mean, he said himself, we tried to go to the negotiation table 4 times. Putin said one thing and then, shock horror, it's of no surprise to anybody in the Western world, done completely the opposite. The man is a liar and a murderous charlatan, so he was never to be trusted. And now he's ramped up his attacks on Russia in the face of the US president trying to persuade him to do precisely the opposite. So he's been played, and ever the negotiator, the art of the deal now is to pivot.
Well, you can say what you will, but I disagree with your premise. When you go into negotiation, sometimes you're dealing with people that you can trust, and sometimes you're dealing with people who will, try to cheat and lie and steal from you. And that is the leadership in Moscow. And he still will get a deal done. It's just an uglier deal. It's just harder to get done because you don't have an honest broker across the table. But I think that his idea of keeping a friendly relationship with every world leader, being able to pick up the phone, being able to work on bringing this to an end, is really important. The leaders have to be able to do that, but his team is working behind the scenes. I mean, I don't know that they're getting a lot of sleep right now, working to bring this to an end.
Carla Sands, thank you very much.
Wow, Carla.
Yes.
Look, she makes an interesting point, doesn't she, when it comes to, it's all very well you and I sort of saying in a slightly Team America World Police way, oh, we must take on the mullahs and we must take on the communists and we, it's just America against this axis of evil that we perceive China, Russia and North Korea to be. She's actually saying, yeah, it's all very well using all that kind of gung-ho rhetoric. We need a solution here. So actually, yeah, everything is about the art of the deal.
Yes.
That's credible, isn't it?
I think she put it very well. There are very few administration people putting it as well, which is part of the problem. There are not enough Trump whisperers to explain to us in compelling and convincing terms what he's thinking and why. So it all ends up going through the filter of the media, which picks up on the inconsistencies or the outrageousness of what he says. And I'm personally not one of those Team America World Police people. I'm one of those anti-war conservatives who wanted, if he had won, I would have wanted him to win in order to end wars. But I am satisfied to allow him to do what he thinks he needs to do, because I don't regard a vote for Trump as a vote for a particular ideology. It's a vote for a character. I'm trusting that he has a character I sympathize with, which is that of a deal maker who wants peace on the best possible terms. And therefore I'm willing to let him go away and negotiate. And sometimes to ramp it up, sometimes to go hawk, like he did with Iran. But I trust in his character that he won't go all the way to war. Because remember with Iran, there was a week in which we all thought America might actually go to a war with Iran, and people were talking about World War III and all that. And I never thought that. I just thought, no, he's just going to let the Israelis bomb the nuclear sites. He might get involved himself, and then he'll step back. Because like Carla, I see this from the point of view of he has the right character to be president in these foreign policy situations. I don't think he's going to set the world on fire.
But this is also what the left gets wrong about Trump. The left looks at Trump, and because he is bombastic and bright orange and so vocal in his beliefs, people assume that he is gung-ho, trigger
that he's
happy.
bellicose, and he's not.
That he is literally got a pump-action shotgun metaphorically strapped to his shoulder at any given period, willingly sending generals off into battle.
Yeah.
He is not that person.
No, and neither was Ronald Reagan, who, as I said, was behind Carla on the bookshelf. She had a little bust of Ronnie Reagan.
She had a nice photo of her and Trump. Did you see that on the left-hand side?
She did. Reagan went to war with one country, the Caribbean island of Grenada, which was not in a position to fight back, right?
No.
He did not readily get involved in hot wars. When a bomb went off in Beirut, he protested and pulled the Americans out. He negotiated for hostage releases. The traditional Republican position is actually one of extreme pragmatism when it comes to foreign policy. The exception was George W. Bush. Trump is a return to normal.
Yes.
Which is why I keep coming back
because George W. Bush and Tony Blair just went off the reservation.
Yeah, and of course it's so often Britain is the tail wagging the foreign policy dog, and that's what a lot of conservative Americans think. They love Peter Mandelson, by the way. The Trump administration has really come around to Mandelson. They think he's great.
Why?
But I guess he's just super charming and tells them everything they want to hear.
Yeah, probably gossips
That's
as well.
the way Mandelson gets ahead in life. He just tells people what they want to hear. But a lot of American conservatives actually blame us. They blame particularly Boris Johnson for the Ukraine war still going. They think it could have...
Because they think that Boris was the international statesman on the back of his support for Ukraine, which, while great for his own political stature, might not have been good for troops on the ground.
They think he disrupted negotiations in Istanbul, and they might not be wrong.
I still do want the goodies taking on the baddies in a fairly robust way, though. Sorry to be old-fashioned about it.
I still want the Ukrainians to win, and you know what? Trump has not just said, we're pulling out. He could do that. He could just say, this is it. I'm not having any more to do with it. You're done.
But
he
then
hasn't actually said that.
But you can't have it both ways. We've discussed this before. On one hand, I'm the strong man on the world stage. I'm the most important player. It's USA, I'm the big leader, and yet I'm going to back out when the going gets tough.
Yes.
And not sort of lead the Western world over the top, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, you can't, then you're perceived to be weak and an appeaser. And it doesn't play to the whole star-spangled approach that you're trying to take on the global stage. So you've got to be careful with that. I mean, we do expect... It's interesting, though, because this is all kind of America trying to help Ukraine, okay, as Carla says, not necessarily to win, but not to lose badly through its now European proxies.
Yeah.
This is interesting. Just as it used Israel as its proxy in Iran, it's now saying, right, well, we give the weaponry via Europe, so it looks as if you're doing this, not us.
But also, Europeans will buy it. Now, what suckers are we that Europeans will pay for weaponry and then give it to Ukraine? I mean, that's weird, isn't it?
Well, why? What do you want us to do?
But why are we handing over our own stockpiles of weapons to Ukraine? I mean, the Americans just think we're crazy.
No, hang on. I think the Americans aren't the Americans giving short-range missiles, howitzer rounds, and medium-range air-to-air missiles.
But the idea is that much of this
to Ukraine via us.
Much of this, so they're selling the weapons to Europeans. European governments are then giving the weapons to Ukraine. So effectively, America is selling us our own war.
Yes.
So that's quite clever as a deal goes.
He's good at deals, though.
He's very good at deals, and we're very bad at deals.
Don't you want to be giving weapons to Ukraine?
I do want to be giving weapons to Ukraine, and I want Ukraine to win. But Trump's administration, again, left gets it wrong. It's not chauvinistic in the sense that it believes America is the greatest nation. If you say make America great again, you're conceding it's not great right now. They think it's overextended. They've noticed that multipolarity is the future. China and Russia and India are going to be big players too. And they are worried that if America continues to, as you put it, go over the top, lead the West over the top, the point will come when, like the Roman Empire, it's so overstretched that it collapses. So for America actually to maintain strategic power in the world, it's actually got to say no to things as well as yes to things. And it's got to stay out of some conflicts. That's why it's happy to bomb Iran's nuclear sites to stop it from getting the bomb, but it won't actually go to war with Iran because that would actually destroy American power.
I love that. The next book from Donald Trump, The Power of No.